Check. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DenverScript September meetup. Great. Awesome. Let's get started. Take your seats if you haven't yet. Here we go. I have some things for you. First up, welcome. Good to see you. And here's our code of conduct. So if you haven't attended our meetup before, we like to adhere to this. So if you go to DenverScript.com/code of conduct, it has the full text. These are just some bullet points I'm going to read you now. DenverScript is dedicated to providing a harassment-free community for everyone. Participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the community at the discretion of the DenverScript organizers. If you are being harassed, notice that someone is being harassed, or have any other concerns, please contact a DenverScript organizer immediately. So today, your organizers are myself. I'm CJ. We also have Marlena, and then Cass back there. So yeah, if you have any concerns, you can walk up to us. Also, if you don't feel comfortable with doing that, DenverScript@gmail.com. We can communicate via text as well. But basic ground rules, be kind. Don't talk over the organizers or speakers. You all did a wonderful job of quieting down. We're getting started. Same thing whenever we have our speakers up here. And then we will have time for Q&A during the talks. So just make sure you ask constructive questions. Don't try to prove a point or a gotcha or something like that. If you really do have a concern, you're more than welcome to walk up to the speaker afterwards, but it's not fun to try and defend yourself being attacked, maybe? Maybe it's not an attack, I don't know. Just be kind, ask good questions, and you'll get good answers. We are live on YouTube right now, so if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, we're at DenverScript Meetup over on YouTube. And with that in mind, whenever you have a question, be sure to wait for the mic, because otherwise the live stream won't be able to hear you. And also, thanks to our sponsors. So the space we're in right now is Code Talent, code-talent.com. They are a technical talent agency. And so if you are looking for a job or you are an employer looking to hire people, definitely reach out to them. They're really great. I've heard this, I didn't come up with this, but they are recruiters that know the difference between Java and JavaScript. So they're really great to work with. Also, the pizza was provided by the wonderful Cass. Yes. And it was a great choice too. Lots of good stuff over there. So if you want to help out, her Venmo is Cassandra-T. Or you can just walk up and say thank you to her as well. That's always great. And if you work at a company that would potentially like to see your logo or name up here, we're also looking for sponsors, so we don't have to buy the food ourselves. And with that said, DenverScript@gmail.com if you have an inquiry about sponsoring. And then also, we're always looking for talks. I will say, as of right now, there aren't meetups planned for the rest of the year because we've got October next month where some of the organizers are busy. We've got November, and it's going to be Thanksgiving, and then we have December, which is Christmas. So you might not see another meetup until January, but keep an eye on DenverScript.com because we might try to do maybe like a remote meetup. One of the things the organizers have been talking about is running like a speaker workshop. So if you haven't given a talk before, but you want to learn how to write an abstract or just work on your speaking skills, we might hold an impromptu online workshop or something like that, and also maybe get you some resources so that going into next year we have talks as well. But I guess in the meantime, even if you do have a talk, still submit it because we can get things lined up for next year as well. All right, next up we have JavaScript news with Marlena.
Thank you very much. All right. So first of all, I want to note that if you are curious to look at any more details or follow the links on this list, it's at DenverScript.com/news, and you can find our news roundups for each month. I'm going to go through this quickly so that we have plenty of time today, so I apologize if it doesn't have the detail you would desire. For anyone familiar with Rome, it is now Biome, which is very fun to say. Biome is the new Rome. Quality naming. Bun, an alternative to Node 1.0 was just released. It's pretty cool. I played around with it a bit, and it's definitely worth taking a peek at, just because for anyone who's worked with Node, like Node has been kind of the de facto, and it's interesting to see what else could be. So I find that always very interesting. On that note, Node now supports .env files natively, which is really cool. One less package, thank God. And I wanted to call out, debated if this was news or a conference, but next month is Hacktoberfest. So with things like Bun and other packages that we're going to be talking about that are kind of new to the scene, I bet there's lots of great issues to work on. So it's a great opportunity to, for those who don't know, Hacktoberfest is just an open source bug bash, basically. There's lots of issues that you can go find. They'll be tagged for beginners. They'll be tagged in ways that help you understand what the problem is. You can submit a pull request, have it accepted, and you have contributed to open source, which is pretty awesome. As for conferences, coming up very soon is JS Game Dev Summit, which is online. Unfortunately, it does cost money. ViteConf is also online and free at the beginning of October. Love that. React Summit US is hybrid, so you can do online only. It is paid and a touch pricier. That's in November. Then Conf42 JavaScript 2023, online and free in November as well. And Extreme JS, online, paid, closer to the end of November. They're really risking a lot putting it that close to Thanksgiving, honestly. As for releases, I believe it's actually Node 20.7 now. I took my notes too early. Astro 3.0 came out. It's a web framework focused on transitions and nice, slick UIs. There's Bun 1.0. We're not going to go further into that. Full 4.0. Lots and lots of changes. Oh God, the dependencies. Electron version 26. I can't believe Electron's been around for a long time, which I've been hearing a lot more chatter about it lately. Maybe that's just me. Cypress 13. There's now New.js, which is a new user interface library meant to be very slim and low on abstraction. And VS Code August 2023 came out. As for resources, I found the Node.js toolbox, which is a bit like the awesome lists, but you can see how people think about it based on weekly downloads or monthly stars, and you can really compare and contrast your libraries for Node. Peak.js, I just thought this was fun. It's audio waveform visualization for the browser. I think I'm a dork, but it's very fun. We've got an article about writing an efficient Node.js Docker image. I highly recommend this if you think you're ever going to be doing that, because there is a lot of complexity in it. I always love to include some testing resources because tests. So some React testing. I'm going to skip over TensorFlow, Web LLM, and TypeChat. They are all related to language models, AI, quotes, and running models with JavaScript in a browser, potentially, and like all that kind of fun stuff. This is my favorite one. This is from the 90s. This is a JavaScript tutorial from the 90s that resurfaced. And the code runs. That's how backwards compatible JavaScript is. So if you want a little look to the past, I do recommend. And then Chalkist is, I put this in because we have a lot of presenters now and for the future presenters out there. This is a way to basically get beautiful images of your code rather than like trying to screen cap your IDE and it's never the right size. And so this allows you to do a lot of fiddling to make exactly the code presentation that you want so that your listeners can actually see it. And that's the news for today. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. So we have 3 talks for you tonight. Kim and Kyle, you're going up first, so go ahead and come on up. Michael, you're on deck. Yep. And then Trenton, you'll be last. And then after that, we have a networking and icebreaker thing planned. So you'll get to talk to each other and meet each other and stuff like that. So we got some fun stuff. In the meantime, if you haven't grabbed pizza, grab some pizza. We're going to get set up here. Alrighty, everyone. Next up, we have Kyle Coberly and Kim Schlesinger, who's going to give the talk, How to Run a Bootcamp.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Schlesinger, and this is my friend Kyle Coberly, and we're going to talk to you about how to run a boot camp. And what we mean by that is a software boot camp. So a for-profit school where adults who are looking to change careers go by learning how to write code. So that's the context. So Kyle and I, along with CJ and Cass and Marlena and Brooks, who's in the back, we worked.
Chad.
Oh, sorry, Chad. And
Cass.
Chad. I said Cass, I think.
Okay.
And Eli, actually. We used to work at a boot camp called Galvanize here in Denver. And we learned a lot about education. And now we've developed some strong opinions about how to run an adult educational institution. So we're going to tell you 3 things, and we'll just tell you up front. The first lesson is that you should admit students who don't already know how to program. The second lesson is you want to fix mastery, not time. And the final lesson is make it fun, not grueling. So,
The in the hole lesson that you should take away is, anyone? All right, never mind.
all right, so the first lesson is admit students who don't already know how to program. So this is good for 2 reasons. One, you're going to get a way more diverse student body by admitting people who either have not had an opportunity to program or didn't go to school for it already. And 2, since you're a for-profit institution, you're going to have more students available for you to enroll in your school. So it's a good moneymaker. A lot of boot camps historically have admitted students who already know how to program or who have friends who are developers. And the way we know that's true is a lot of the admissions process, or a lot of the ways that admissions worked at boot camps, was they would give prospective students a coding challenge. And so some students could figure it out themselves. Some students who had friends who were developers could ask their friends. And a lot of students, especially women and people who are underrepresented in tech, said, you know what, I don't think this is for me. So they just self-opted out of the admissions process. So when you are running a boot camp, make it a priority to admit students who don't know how to program. And that means in your admissions process, you're probably going to have to look for things other than can they write code already? So yeah, that's the first point. Second point.
I'm losing stickers. All right, so our second point is to fix mastery, not time. So what this means is that you can do 4 things. You can do 3 things. The 4th one you can't do. You can guarantee what somebody will get out of an education program without guaranteeing how long it's going to take. So you will be able to do these discrete things. You will be able to ride a bike. You will be able to do whatever at the end of this program. It might take you a day, it might take you a week, it might take you a year. The time, if we're fixing time, we can say that the program is a week long, 6 months long, 8 months long, 15 weeks long. You can guarantee neither of those. You can't guarantee both. You can't say this program will be 15 weeks long and we guarantee that you will have this set of skills at the end. It's straight up not possible. So if you have to pick one, how about you pick the one that matters? And this is like kind of a mind-blowing thing because you may not have ever had an education program that worked like that fixed mastery rather than time. And admittedly, they're difficult to design, and every time that I've brought this up at any of the 4 schools that I've run, regulatory, but the regulators. So if it's something that matters to you, there's always a way to make that work. And so here's a way that we made it work in Colorado. Colorado boot camps are regulated fairly aggressively, but they're not an education regulator, they're a consumer protection regulator. So they want to know that you're doing what you said that you were going to do. So as long as you're giving clear communication and ready feedback about how close somebody is to meeting the outcomes that you described, in the state of Colorado, you only have to report somebody's graduation date if it's more than 150% of the advertised program length. So when we did this in our program, we said, hey, you know what? Don't worry about the schedule. Don't worry about graduation date. Just do the program. And all of a sudden, everybody relaxes a little bit. Everybody starts learning a little bit more. And in the pilot cohort that we did this with, we had 25 students. All 25 of them graduated inside of the 150%. Slowest student was a veteran with a traumatic brain injury and just needed more time. He did the program. It was nominally a 6-month program, got through it in 8 months, and all 25 of them got jobs within the original 1-year program, 6-month job search, job guarantee. It's a radically different way to approach a program, but if you believe in it, it works. And yeah. And our third one is that school should be fun, not grueling. Kim, do you have any thoughts on how you make school fun?
Yes, I do, Kyle. Thank you. So even though it's called a boot camp, don't run it like a boot camp. One thing we tried to do, and I know Kyle worked at more schools after we stopped working together, is don't expect your students to do 5 hours of studying after school. They've already been there all day long. Their brains are tired. They have families and friends. And so limit the amount of homework, limit the amount of things that you're asking them to do after the actual school day. Back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kimberly. I think when people go to a program like that, they're like, no, I came here to work, man. I want to crank. I can't be in last place. And a lot of that stuff just ignores how brains work. There's a finite amount of stress you can put your brain under, and especially over a long enough period of time. And so it's not the length of the program. Definitely not the intensity of the program. So here's an example. Cortisol is a brain chemical that, it's a hormone that your body releases when you're under stress. And it does a lot of different things, one of which is it blocks memory retrieval. This is I need to run away from the lion, and so you don't remember, that guy's name was Jeff, I'm pretty sure. So we don't need that. It also stops your fingernails from growing, stops a whole bunch of different things. It's kind of all power to thrusters mode. And it keeps you from retrieving your memories, pretty important part of synthesizing information and learning. So if you can find ways to make it fun, that's not oh yeah, I guess that would be nice. This is a critical part of the learning process. Also, when people are having a good time, they loosen up, their inhibitions go down, they're willing to try new things, which is also a huge part of the learning process. On behalf of both of us, set aside the hey bro, are you tough enough for a career in software development? Career changes are hard enough already, so please, make your school fun. There you go, that's what I'd say.
Well, let's recap.
All right, to recap,
if you're thinking about running a software boot camp in the future, we recommend admitting students who don't already know how to program. That also means you have to know how to teach programming. Fixing mastery and not time. That's probably the most radical departure from the school system that most of us went through. And then make it fun, not grueling. Thank you so much. I'm Kim, this is Kyle. These are our handles, and we'd love to chat after.
All right, we have time for questions. If anybody has questions? Anybody completely disagree? No.
I was just curious, the things that you look for in students.
yes.
So you said don't look for somebody who's coded before. What are the things that you do look for that make you feel like they would be good?
I love this question. So the team that I described, Galvanize's admissions process was a coding challenge initially. Hey bro, do you even code, bro? And so we sat down as a team, and a lot of us had worked there a while, and we said, what are the skills and attitudes that successful students have when they come into the program? And so we had a lot of discussions about it, and they became things are you creative and can you start and finish a creative project? So we ended up having an admissions portfolio where students had to demonstrate multiple things. So one was creativity. And I think, Marlena, you might have been a student in that. You submitted.
No, I submitted did the coding challenge.
Okay, the coding challenge. Well, I remember one student, some students were musicians, and they said, like, this was an album that my band and I made. Some students were fiber artists and said, this is a quilt that I made. Some people were like, I'm not...
Recipe that I came up
Yeah, recipe. Some people who maybe weren't like an artist before said like, I don't know, but I learned this recipe and I did it. So you're actually identifying the skills and behaviors that aren't coding related that you're looking for. Was there any other part of the portfolio that struck any of you as cool?
Sticking with something long enough to get good at it. There was the creative project. There was, Chad did like logic, so like Chad would do these interviews where he played 20 questions, and he would play 20 questions to somebody, and then he'd give them feedback on how they did it. And what we were really looking for was, were they able to apply the feedback? So like some of the questions that people used to whittle down what the object was were not great. Like Chad would tell us, like they just kept trying to guess. They're like, "Is it a paper?" It's like, no, 19 questions left. So, and so you give them feedback, and like, can they apply that? Can they apply logic to something? And I think that like that sort of stuff is what we noticed was a huge part of what made somebody successful in the program. Honestly, somebody who already thought that they were good at programming coming in, that ends up being a detriment because they cruise to the first 3 weeks, and then once they get to the stuff that nobody knows, everybody else has spent 3 weeks learning how to hustle. They've spent 3 weeks thinking that they're too good for this. And so, like, sincerely, like it is a little bit of a disadvantage to already have like some chops, we thought.
The other thing was oh, sure. Well, I was going to have you guys say it. But to try to assess problem-solving skills and critical thinking, we would ask, we have a lamp and it won't turn on, what do you do? Oh, yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people like don't go through the steps of like, all right, well, is it plugged in? Is the light bulb bad? Like all of those things that like as a programmer and a debugger, like you think of all these possible things, but some people can't do that or haven't learned to do that. So. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I just studied up on LeetCode. Code. They didn't have any LeetCode code questions about flashlights, bro.
Yeah, and so like if you're maybe like a hiring manager and you're looking to, maybe you have a program where you train people up, sit down with your team and talk about people who are successful at your company and try to break down like what are some of the things that they know and are able to do that aren't necessarily coding related, and if you can codify that, then you can assess for that. But yeah, we did get creative, and then the admissions process got a little harder because it was a portfolio of things that we had to look through as opposed to like, did they pass the coding challenge or not? Yeah, so yeah, thanks for the question. Any other questions? I know we're exceeding our time. Thanks, y'all.
Next up is Michael. If you want to come on up.
Oh boy.
Alrighty. Michael Bocim
Yes.
will be giving a talk on, wait, what was it? A brief chat about time, so please give it up.
This is the first time I've done a slideshow in like a long time, so bear with me. Okay. A little bit about me. I'm an aspiring software engineer, musician, hiker, runner, all the usual Colorado things, sci-fi, origami, 3D printing. I'm a hobbyist. But I want to talk a little bit about a bug I was working on recently and a volunteer project I work on. So first of all, let me just, in case you haven't encountered these specific things, first thing I'm going to bring up is JavaScript's date object. And also bear with me, this is just my surface level understanding of some of these. So if you have some further insight afterwards, I'd love to hear about it. JavaScript date object represents a single moment in time in a platform-independent format. It encapsulates an integral number that represents milliseconds since the midnight after the beginning of January 1st. So is it epic? Is it epoch? How do people say that? Quick show of hands, who says epoch? Okay, I'm gonna try and say it that way the rest of the night. So, just real quick, here's too many ways to make a JavaScript date object. Let's see. Just stare at it for a second. No, it's horrible, right? Now, the other thing I want to talk about briefly, because this was the other part of the bug I encountered, is the volunteer project had made a shift from the moment datetime library to Luxon. If you haven't worked with Luxon, it's a really nice datetime library. It gives what are some notes? What are my notes? It's got better time zone support. It's better for parsing and formatting, and it gives a more human readable setup for what you're reading. So, also, that cortisol is just like totally overwhelming my mind now, so I don't even remember my own slides. Thank you. All right, so how do we talk about right now? Or I guess this would be 55 minutes ago. So we've got ISO 8601. When you got a Z at the end, that represents UTZ. Then you've got a time zone offset. Then you've got a short date time, a long date time, a Unix time. There's more. That 5 seemed like enough for a slide. I feel like any more than that would have been overkill. So, the bug. There was a form for creating an event that was right 99.5% of the time. And any guesses what that 0.5 was that was incorrect? Yeah. Daylight savings time.
Are you talking about the moments before and after the time changes?
Yeah. Well, so it was really bizarre what would happen where it wasn't even lining up on the day of daylight savings time. It was manifesting in both cases the day before daylight savings time because it had to do with UTC time, but then its representation of how it was put into the form. So the form thought it was tomorrow, the database thought it was tomorrow, but the form thought it was today, and it did all kinds of weird things, and like the event would get updated and the time would change one direction, and it was very bizarre. So the reason I brought up JavaScript date is because the date picker in the event creation form wanted a JavaScript date. And this was a problem because you can because the JavaScript date time, as I understood it, takes that time after the number of seconds or milliseconds. So the day wasn't guaranteed to be correct. You could have a time zone that was several hours ahead of now, and you'd end up with a day that was different, just off by one, which is not great when you're trying to create an event for people to show up to, and you want them to show up at the right day and time. So here's just a kind of an example of that. So yeah, if I create a new date object with our time zone for here, cool, right? It's the 26th. But now I'm talking about something that's another 4 hours off, and suddenly this value is the 27th, and unfortunately this component only cared about that number right there. So, oops. Oh no, what did I do?
Command Z.
Come on, come back to me. So part of the resolution was to create a date object using specific values. That was one of the constructors, is picking the specific year, month. BTW, if you don't know this, the month of a JavaScript date object is 0 indexed. Apparently because that's coming from like Java or something, like the early days of its implementation, and it's just a little quirk that it's always been there. So yeah, year, 0 indexed, month, day, time, and then you end up with a value that you want to see correctly. The other part of the form, the time picker, it wanted either seconds after midnight, and that was the way it was implemented in the form, or you can give it a specific hour string. And now, as you see what I've got up here, what does 43,200 seconds really mean? Most of the time, it means 12 p.m., but the 2 days out of the year, daylight savings time, it's going to be one or the other, and then there's some inconsistencies. So what happened? The time was pulled out, the date, the Luxon worked great on its own, but when it tried to interact with these two pieces in its previous iteration, the number of seconds was being passed into part of the form, the date object was being passed into the part of the form, resulting in very inconsistent values. And so I have 2 minutes left. I just saw a yellow sign, made me panic. No, so it was really just, it was an interesting introduction for me into understanding, being consistent about what is trying to be presented. Felt very semantic. In one way, in one instance, I'm saying this is the specific day and time on the form, no matter where I am in the world, and the other is representing an actual specific day and time, storing that. So it was very enlightening, and I think it gave me a lot of good insight into how to handle future bugs. So, yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions if you got them. Yeah.
I know that we all experience existential crises when dealing with a bug, but I feel like this one was like a dual level existential crisis. That did you have that? Were you like, what is time? And who am I? And what the hell am I doing here?
I mean, that's kind of like a day-to-day thing anyways, so it just kind of fed right into my normal routine.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So I was curious if through dealing with this bug, if you found other libraries or other sort of modules that you might use rather than Luxon that might play better with JavaScript, or is this just a problem to consider for the future no matter how you're sort of like diving into the subject?
I'd say I found Luxon to be very intuitive once I got into using it, and it felt like what was the underlying problem is the previous library revolved more around JavaScript data objects, so it seems more like updating the components to use more intuitive time values is the next thing that would be worth working on.
Recalling cortisol, do you recall how you zeroed in on the test data that showed what the problem was?
I do know there were several console logs. It was kind of just piecewise tracking the value as it had been pulled from the database and seeing like, okay, what's changed it into what I don't want it to be. And there was, I feel like there was like 5 or 6 different places where the date time string was being acted upon. And so identifying those, removing some of those, and making it, just trying to keep the UTC string as like my source of truth. Yeah.
Thanks. Alrighty. Everyone, can you please give it up for Trenton Kennedy, who's going to be talking about developing with a modern ecosystem.
All right, can everyone hear me? Great. So today I'm going to be talking about developing with a modern ecosystem. All the frameworks and platforms and tools that we put together over time to build a really fun product called Loggly. So to start off, what is Loggly? About 2 years ago, a friend and past colleague approached me from Chicago, actually, where there's a ton of museums. And after visiting some museums, we discussed the idea of building essentially a content management system for administrators at smaller museums to enable them to build guided tours. So we do have an Instagram where we kind of show the product being used in the wild. And basically an admin, if a small museum doesn't have a digital team, the admin at the museum who's trying to build interaction with visitors can generate these QR codes using our platform by uploading and writing content. And we pride ourselves in making the content very accessible. So it's all mobile friendly, web-based, and the content can be audio tours or text or images and video. So once someone walks in and is visiting the museum, they can just scan QR codes at their own leisure and have tours throughout the experience. So while developing this, for the last 2 years roughly, we've been through a lot of different changes, and over time I started to notice what I'm calling an ecosystem of different libraries and frameworks and platforms that we use daily in our development process to release new features. So I wanted to share those with you today. Now, first off, I want to say, there's a lot of great frameworks and tools out there. These are just ones that we picked for our needs. And in our case, we still have a small team of around 5 people. Sometimes we have contractors who will come on for, a couple months to help out. But we wanted to pick, a tech stack that enables our non-technical team, because we only have 1 to 2 developers at any given time. Everybody else is from data science or content marketing or other backgrounds. So we wanted to have a setup that would enable, integrations in Slack and non-technical feedback to the rest of our staff. So we picked Vercel to be, our core host, which gives us a great dashboard that even non-technical people can log into and somewhat navigate and read feedback around the health of the app. Once you pick a platform like Vercel for hosting, you'll quickly realize there's a lot of support out there for frameworks like Next and React, which they promote pretty heavily. It all integrates really well. There's also a lot of community behind Tailwind, which we use for handling our design and styling. Playwright we're using for handling all of our testing, end-to-end tests. We automate that and deploy the results to Vercel in a separate app. Cloudinary we're using for managing all of our assets. So if users upload media, Cloudinary handles the CDN process for us and gives us back an API to work with. It also can handle stuff like censorship if you want to give the customer the option to approve or disapprove potentially explicit images that are uploaded. So there's a lot of cool stuff to do with that. For configurations and stuff, we use Prettier and ESLint and different config files. For our architecture, we're working with a mono repo, so Turbo repo, which I'll talk about next. It helps us orchestrate our mono repo. And then, there's some other tools and frameworks worth mentioning. This is not the whole list, but these are kind of the core items that we work with every day. So GitHub, not only for code hosting, but we use it pretty heavily for GitHub Actions. A lot of the interaction on our product gets sent to Slack through GitHub Actions so that our business team can make informed decisions. And then for our backend, since I come from a front-end background, we use Supabase for everything in our backend, which is a wrapper around Postgres. So that gives us a really robust API to work with. That way I don't have to spend too much time trying to learn, database management while also building the other pieces. And for our content editor, one that I really wanted to mention from our third-party plugin resources is TipTap. So that's just a React component, but it's a really well-built open source project that is worth giving a shout out because it handles all the content editing that we could possibly need for our users, and it gives it back to us in multiple different forms, which helps with stuff like interacting with AI APIs. For example, TipTap will let our users use a WYSIWYG editor, but then it can send you in real time the content in HTML form, JSON form, or just raw text. So even though the users formatted the text, the developer who needs to use that text as data can take TipTap output in different forms and interact with all these other frameworks. So the first piece of our ecosystem worth mentioning is our architecture. We're using a monorepo. Another popular architecture is microservices. We chose monorepo because TurboRepo, which is owned by Vercel, is pretty well documented. And I wanted to do a little bit of an interactive demo with some of these slides. So this is our architecture here. So you'll see as a monorepo, we have multiple applications. Each of these is an isolated Next.js app. Admin CMS manages all the content editing. It's what our users log into when they first sign up. The front-end app is how we manage our static generated content to the people visiting the museums. And then reports is more for internal use. It's where all of our tests put their output that they generate automatically. And it helps us just have a place to look at for the health of the application. So any one of these apps within the monorepo could just as easily use Svelte or Nuxt. The possibilities are endless. What TurboRepo does is gives us a config file that allows us to orchestrate all of these apps. So I meant to run this while talking. In the root repository, I can build all of the applications asynchronously. And you'll see, because of caching from TurboRepo, it built pretty quickly. So the front-end app generated static routes. The admin or reports app also generated some static content. And the admin CMS built successfully as well. So with this, we're able to easily manage all of the pieces of Loggly in one build, or we can work on each app individually. So if I need to build a feature in the admin, I can, and I can just open that one app in its own editor and run it separately. So, and by the way, I'm gonna just kind of gloss over some of these pieces, but feel free to sync up with me after if there's something you want to learn more about in depth. Another important piece of our ecosystem that's worth mentioning is how we handle our data. So this code snippet here is actually from our code we were just looking at, and I wanted to point out three important things. So the first is the actual architecture. The entire component is a React server component, or the entire function is used inside a React server component. So we don't have a layer for like a node server with APIs. We don't have like a GraphQL querying layer. Because it's all server side, we're able to just fetch our data straight from the database. By this point, user authentication has already happened in middleware, and the browser, the client, is getting a static HTML page with the data hydrated into it because it is a server component. So if there were an error in the data fetching, for example, an invalid session, then we have a fallback template that Next.js gives us to render. So if a server component were to return an error, we can gracefully show in that component, an error message. And this can happen at the page level or component level. So the second thing to note here is we are using the Supabase API. So this is really powerful. It's a JavaScript library that comes with your Supabase database. So let's take a quick look at the actual interface it gives you. This is our development database. This is just public content that is the artifacts we created for testing. So, an artifact is like an artwork. It's what the visitors to the museum will see. Supabase gives us a UI for our Postgres database. And the API that we get out of the box allows us to query any cell or row or column from the table that we were just looking at. So you can see it gives us a chaining syntax so that we can select pretty much anything we want. And the documentation for this is really robust. I'll let you check it out sometime. Supabase is great at updating their docs. The third thing I wanted to point out is TypeScript. So again, I'm a big fan of Supabase by this point, if you can't tell. They give us a CLI, so we can auto-generate types based on our data. So if we create a new cell or row or column in our database, then we can leverage the CLI-generated types for our unique data, which helps with catching bugs if you change the schema, for example, but forget to update your components. The next part of our ecosystem I wanted to touch on is how we handle design. So we are using Figma for collaboration and designing our UI components prior to coding. And then I don't know if everyone here has experienced Figma, but the CSS output is really powerful. So just a quick demo of what you can do. So you can right-click any element and copy as code and copy CSS output and then just paste that. It does give you excessive code, which is why we manually have the process of converting this into Tailwind classes, because a lot of this we don't actually need each time we copy styles from Figma. But there are some core things here, so like any color codes or font sizes, etc. The other quick thing to mention about our design piece of the ecosystem that we work with Tailwind, you can have, this was a really aha moment for me, you can have custom styling, so like BG dash, if there's a color code that's unique to your pattern library, you can put anything in between brackets. This is really helpful for rapidly prototyping new designs. So anything in brackets is just a custom style like you would write normal CSS. So you can put pixel sizes, color codes, etc. Testing. So again, because we're working with mostly a non-technical team, we are using Vercel really heavily. So Vercel gives us the ability to test in the browser. We, if I invite you to a dev URL, if you're on the team, then within Vercel's branching feature, this can be a preview branch or a feature branch in Git that has a preview URL. So once you're invited and logged in as a user or just a coworker, you can drop in feedback on the UI. And this is one of our makeshift ways of testing. And you can see here, the developer can have a whole laundry list of things to address before the branch actually gets deployed. In addition to that, we use Playwright for end-to-end testing. On my LinkedIn, I don't have time to demo it today, but there is a VS Code plugin for Playwright, and it is really awesome. It's come a long way since when I first learned testing. But with the VS Code plugin, you can actually automatically generate browser-based tests. So what you'll see here, again, this is a video I put on my LinkedIn. You can, with the VS Code plugin and Playwright installed, you'll see in the background that it's generating the tests based on your interactions. So just by recording interactions, you can get started with testing. And that is a great way to, gently introduce tests into your app. So the template that I used for Google Slides had this chart, and I just thought it was cool. But Neptune is crushing it in Q4, so I figured we could appreciate Neptune. But anyways, integrations for the win, and Neptune for the win. So I won't have time to demo this today, but just wanted to touch on integrations as another piece of our ecosystem. This was really powerful for me because, again, when I was starting out building web apps, I didn't do a lot of integration work with the business team, but now you can make informed decisions in real time with the help of integrations. So for example, we use Stripe to handle personal user data. They do it all for us securely, like payment processing. But Stripe gives us webhooks. And we can do a lot with the webhooks. For example, we can, in Slack, we can immediately be notified in a general channel when a new user signs up and creates an organization on our platform. And then if they convert to a premium, we can say another payment has been successfully processed. So all of this just happens through webhooks. Next.js and Vercel are really helpful with this too. So Next.js has API routes, which you can use for tapping into any webhooks like Stripe. But also with Supabase, the possibilities are endless. You can listen to any interactivity that happens on your database and create a webhook to notify your business team in Slack. And that's just scratching the surface. There's a lot more that we could be doing with integrations, and I'm excited to explore more. But that leads me to AI. So we did want to be careful about introducing AI to Loggly. As you saw from the demo, we're trying to keep it very simple. We want the focus to be on the museum artwork. We're just trying to facilitate the accessible guides that complement the artwork. We don't want to be a distraction from that. We want to empower smaller museums to generate this content, but also have people interacting with them. And ultimately, it evolves around the experience at the museum. So for our case, AI took the shape of auto-generated voice tours based on the content that's uploaded. And since this is my last slide, I think we have time for a quick demo here. So this is an example of one of our customers here when they get a generated site. And then on the back end, I have a sample admin that I'm going to use. So let's just start by creating a new experience. And then here in our editor, we're just going to copy some text. I'm a big fan of Edward Hopper. I love his art. So we're just going to, from the Open Wiki, copy his bio here. This isn't published, but you'll see I could publish it for all to see. I'm going to paste the content there to give us an overview of Edward Hopper. And then with the help of 11 Labs, we're going to generate an AI voice. Now, this does take a while. And there's a few things happening in the background, which is actually another point about our ecosystem. 11 Labs has a great API with documentation. We're using Vercel API routes to tap into this. We take the raw text from the editor, from the content editor, and with an API, we pass that to 11 Labs. They stream the result back. So they don't just give you an MP3 file. They stream the audio as it's being created back to our API. So we get a response back as a stream that we turn into an MP3 file. Once that stream has been converted, we upload it to Cloudinary. So Cloudinary also hosts all of our audio. And once it's uploaded to the CDN, we get it back into the browser. And that is how our audio file is populated here. And I think it'll just play on my speaker, right? Do I have? Yes. Okay. Compatibility.
No other artist managed to capture the solitude within the modern city like Edward Hopper. The artist of empty spaces offers a remindful look at life of Americans during Great Depression. His suggestive imagery shares the mood of individuals' isolation with books of Tennessee Williams, Theodore Dreiser, Robert Frost, Jerome Salinger.
So that's the AI we get back. And yeah, this is pretty much all the content that we're creating, for visitors to the museum to have options for their tours. And that is the ecosystem in a nutshell. Please feel free to reach out or check us out on Instagram, where you can find out more about the whole Loggly platform. We love interacting with communities. So yeah, give us a shout out if you want.
Are there any questions?
Yep.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned that you found the mono repo, I think it's Turbo, that you guys are using to be particularly valuable. I was curious if you found any negatives or downsides of having a mono repo and what those might be.
Yes, great question. So, overall, I think it was worth the investment, but a few negatives we've run into. The technology is changing really fast. So they've got a new, not production ready build pack that's an alternative to Webpack. I tried that out, and it created a lot of errors that I didn't want to spend time dealing with because they weren't directly related to code in my app. So some of it, like when you upgrade, will give you erroneous errors all of a sudden that can, keep you up all night. Yeah. It's one of the headaches of dealing with newer technologies. The other thing I would say is within the mono repo architecture, it is a learning curve, but you can benefit from shared dependencies, which it encourages. So if you have code you're using in all of your apps, like a third-party plugin or just config files, it took me a while to figure out how to get it working across all the apps properly. But there is in the monorepo the globals folder, which is just used across all apps. So the learning curve and then the build errors from all the upgrades would be the two main things.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Have you run into any limitations with Supabase?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Have you run into any sort of limitations with Supabase?
Limitations with Supabase. Again, a lot of it has just been learning curve. So under the hood, it's just a PostgreSQL database, and it's open source. So you could, download from GitHub all of the Supabase UI and run it yourself, or just, PG dump all the data from Supabase and run your own database at any point. So I wouldn't say there were really limitations that we ran into, but a major headache was just dealing with environment variables across Vercel and Supabase, and integrations like our email client, talking to the database and ensuring the user was authenticated. So, a lot of that is just limitations on me learning how to orchestrate all of this. But, if you can do it with Postgres, then you can do it with Supabase. Good questions.
I'm curious for like the hosting and deployment and management of all that stuff. How many of the things are on free tier versus actually like a paid subscription?
Oof. It changes every day, and it's something that keeps me up at night because I'm worried that like one of the platforms might have, run out of the free tier and I didn't set a limitation, or I forgot to notify our business, I would say maybe, if I had to guess, this is just a rough estimate, about 40% of the platforms we're using are paid, and they're on reasonable paid plans. And the rest, we like Cloudinary, I'm surprised, but we use Cloudinary a lot, and we're still on the free tier. We do go in manually and make sure to clean up our test data, but we've been on the free tier the whole time with Cloudinary. And then other plans like Vercel, they really get you with upsells. So like you can pay for individual things like analytics, which we realized we were indulging in too much. So like we quickly, got excited and started paying for seats and analytics. And then we realized our Vercel budget was the highest of all the others, all the other platforms. So yeah, it's an ongoing battle managing those budgets. Thankfully, we haven't had any horror stories, but yeah.
I've not worked with Figma before. I was wondering if there's any kind of like answer to responsiveness, or if that kind of has to be done like manually.
Responsiveness.
Like as far as like screen, like so most of the people who are looking at like the content that's created by the museums that you're working with are looking on their phones. Mm-hmm. Are you specifically designing like mobile first, or are you trying to like design?
Yeah, that's a great point. So something I didn't really have much time to get into, the short answer to your question, with Tailwind, we're able to prefix any of our class names with mobile breakpoint prefixes. So like MD : we'll make sure that this class name is only rendered on medium and up screen sizes. So we do mobile first styling. For example, if this width 2/3 is the mobile view, then perhaps the desktop and up it is W-1/2 of the page. And now we have responsive styling. So that's the main piece to our mobile first. But a lot of our testing also is on mobile, because like you said, the end user is coming in with a phone.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you. All right, next up, Marlena has some, you do, right? We do. Okay, cool. Has some, oh, no worries. Some networking activities for you all. I don't know if she has this in her notes, but one thing I wanted to say is if you're sitting next to somebody you know or work with, try to, or whoever you group up with, try to pick people you don't know. Like use this as an opportunity to meet new people.
Don't worry.
She's got it, okay.
All right. I thought so that we could all get to know each other a little better, get up, move around, wake up before we head out there into the big wide world, we would do a little bit of our favorite activity, having opinions. So I'm going to give you a category, and I've got some prompts for that category. And I want someone to come up and we're going to do browsers first. What's your favorite browser? Come take a card and go form a group of people who love Chrome best of all. And then you'll get to spend a couple minutes chatting before we move on to the next prompt, which will allow you to share more of your opinions. Any questions? All right, who wants to come claim Chrome?
And just real quick, we're going to end the live stream. So if you're watching and you're in Denver, if you were here, you could be networking right now.
You could be playing games. It would be fun.
I guess that's true. All right. But thanks everybody for tuning into the live stream. We'll see you later.
Chrome, Firefox, anyone?
You said you give the card to one person, and that person finds other people who
Yeah,
like that
and you want to go find your group.
Flock to
Whichever